Welcome to the Hazard Class Podcast. This is the podcast where I get to ask my stupid questions to some of the smartest people in and around the world of emergency response. My guest this week is a registered dietitian and a certified strength and conditioning specialist. She's built a following by taking her expertise and channeling it directly to first responder community. She's the owner of RescueRD, which is a business dedicated to making nutrition simple, effective, and accessible. My guest this week is Megan Lautz. Megan, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, I need your expertise, so I'm excited to get into it. So as is the format of the show, we open with each episode with the Wheel of Stupid Questions, with just a reminder that asking questions is good. Even if they're stupid, if you point them at the right people, you can get some pretty good results. So we'll jump into that and we'll see what stupid question we get today.
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right, let's spin the wheel and see what we get today. We started to get some duplicates from early on, so I'm interested to see.
You got it rigged is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. All right, this one is this one's probably more geared towards a firefighter than you, but we'll see. I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
What is the largest animal that you believe you could fight with your bare hands?
Oh God, that's a good question. I probably wouldn't do very well, honestly. Maybe I could pick maybe a bear, because I think I could scare it away with a snack.
A bear? Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Not with my bare hand. It would just be more of distraction tactics.
For the sake of reference, the last person said a tortoise.
So
you really dove in with bear. But
yeah, it's all about you got to get the biggest animal, and then you just got to distract them, right?
Hey.
And I've always got pocket snacks.
Yeah. It's amazing what you can accomplish with some pocket snacks.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
work
impressed.
For toddlers, works for
really
firefighters, bear, toddler, firefighter, kind of all the same thing in my opinion.
Exactly. You get it. You totally get it. All right. So let's get into it. So from the jump, what inspired you to be a dietitian? Why?
Yeah, good question. I actually thought I was going to be an athletic trainer when I went into school, but then I realized I had to touch people, and I don't like touching people, just strong veil between. So I went into more of the health arena for the nutrition side, because there was no touching people, right? And I am a civilian, so a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're a firefighter," and I'm like, "No, blood, guts, knocks me out. Nope, can't do it."
Man, so then what is your journey then from, you thought you were going to work in, sports, training, to now you're a dietitian. Then how do you make the leap to first responders?
Yeah, great question. So I came out of my internship, which, for reference, dietitian, are you familiar with dietitian versus nutritionist?
I don't know anything about it. Help me.
Yeah, most firefighters, it's totally fair. There are some really well qualified nutritionists, and then there's the TikTok ones. So in any case, a dietitian, we go to 4 years undergrad. Then now it requires a master's and a unpaid internship for a year, where we pay 10 grand to work 40-hour weeks.
Wow. Lucky you.
Yes, I know. It's a dream. It's about a 7-8 year process, and then you sit for your board. So when I came out of that, I went right into corporate wellness, which I thought was my dream. As a trainer, and a dietitian, I got to do both. And then they laid off all of the coordinators across the country within a year. And I just happened to fall into a job with a relatively large department in the DC area as a wellness coordinator, a wellness manager. And I just really liked it. I took CPAT. I did 24-hour shifts, did the workouts with the recruits. And I just really enjoyed it, and really obsessed with how can I make nutrition fit the job, instead of just coming in and being eat your vegetables, which I did a little bit of that. But, I think it's important to understand the job first before we just start spatting random information at firefighters.
So when you think about that, dealing with the general population versus, firefighters, what are the differences that you see?
Yeah, great question. I think so. If you're ever worked with like the general population to try and make change, it's already hard enough, right? But for them, it's like getting to like a window that's like maybe a slight step above. It's just a little uncomfortable. But the way I like to think of first responders is you are expected to perform 110% at every call, right? So your expectation to perform relative to the general population is much higher. So that window moves up to a second story. But you're starting at a lower foundation and you're dropping into the basement because of stress, sleep deprivation, and exposure to trauma. So now, a lot of times what I see is, different health professionals coming into this population saying, we'll just go vegan, we'll just go vegetarian, only eat one meal a day, intermittent fast. And it's asking firefighters to get to that second story window without a ladder. There's no stepwise approach. So basically, there's just a couple different things that we have to consider because the performance level expectation for cognitive and physical performance is so high, but also you're starting off at a harder playing field level.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as you kind of got to know this population and embedded with it a little bit, what did you immediately identify that we were doing good? And what did you identify that we might have been not doing so good at?
Yeah, I mean, so I think and it's more of a shift, right? Because the fire service, wellness in the fire service is a newer thing, I would say even just in the past 8 years of me being in the field, it's really exploded. So I think you guys are starting to do a lot better job, especially on the fitness side, of prioritizing that and working it into lineup and that kind of thing. Whereas like nutrition, I've seen very few nutrition professionals specializing in the fire service. And if they do exist, they have a very extreme protocol, which is fine. It works for some people, but it doesn't often address the people who are really struggling. So really, like what happens is, I don't know if you've ever been to a conference, like a wellness conference for first responders, but it's like, here, wellness, one slide on nutrition, just eat your vegetables. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm tired. How do I do that? You know what I mean? So I think nutrition is the biggest gap in the fire service, I think, right now.
So you touched on it a little bit earlier with some of these factors that, quote unquote, put us in the basement. How do they stack into our nutrition? When you talk about trauma and sleep deprivation and other things like that I think, like from the outside looking in, it might seem like an excuse, but like understanding from the inside looking out that it does make some unique challenges. Can you talk about that and how it affects, eating?
Yeah. And I've worked with a ton of people who are like, well, it's, just no excuses. But I think it's important to meet firefighters where they're at and help them understand that you understand. Right. And with that, sleep deprivation, we see a 24% increase in hunger after one night of bad sleep, and that leads to a 28% increase in ghrelin, the hunger stimulating hormone, and an 18% decrease in leptin, the hunger suppressing hormone. So that leads to a shift in your food choices the next day because you're going for things that are fattier, higher in sodium, higher in sugar, right? And I'm sure you felt that. I've felt that as a professional. And then on the trauma side as well, like no one runs a pediatric code and then is like, I want a salad, that also changes your food choices. And of course, when you're talking about regular exposure to trauma, or, I've had a couple people with several career calls after the birth of a child, that starts leading to the mental health challenges, right? And that can lead to alterations in food choices, and just kind of overall struggling with meal prep and having the motivation to do stuff. So I think it's really important to start with the first like 3 rungs of that ladder, which is often fast food, frozen food, packaged food, or things that are non-perishable so that you have those backups so that if that room flashes over, you slide back down the ladder, you have something to keep you from going all the way to the basement.
Okay, I feel that. So let's touch on that then. What are some things that I can do to combat that exact thing? Because I can tell you, I never eat fast food, but unless I'm driving home from getting my butt kicked overnight, all of a sudden that Burger King by my house looks pretty cool. And I have to I very rarely cave to the inclination, but it never looks interesting until I'm coming home from a long night at work. What do I do to combat that?
Well, so one thing is to consider your route home if there's a workaround, right? Is there a back way into the neighborhood so you don't drive past it? That's actually worked really well for some of my clients. I've worked with people who they drive past a Chick-fil-A to go home every day, and they would stop because they wanted that. They were just tired. They didn't have any other options. So we had them go the back way home, and they significantly reduced how many times they stopped at Chick-fil-A because they didn't see it. Out of sight, out of mind, right? So that's one way. We also see this work really well for the treats at the fire station. The community donations, that table of crap. So hiding that behind a closed door or pantry, and then having some healthier options like a bowl of fruit, granola bars, nuts and seeds, that kind of thing. Dr. Jill Joyce did a study on this and found that firefighters ate an additional pound of produce per shift when the treats were out of sight, out of mind, and the healthier options were on the counter. So that is a way that you can change your nutrition environment and make better choices without really thinking about it. And a lot of firefighters will be like, well, Megan, I don't want to bring a bag of apples as my overtime contribution, right? Everybody's going to make fun of me. Well, everybody's going to make fun of you for something. Okay. I've worked in the fire service long enough that you're going to get made fun of. And if that's the worst thing you're going to get made fun of for, you're actually getting off pretty easy.
Yeah, that's true. So when you think about, and even just hearing you talk, you obviously know all the things that are the thing, which is really interesting, especially someone coming from, a civilian standpoint. It's unique to hear someone talk and you speak the language correctly, which is cool.
I'm trying. I still screw it up sometimes.
Yeah, but you speak in a way that I know you've done the work, which is cool because oftentimes when I talk to civilians, they just are it's a world that they couldn't even understand. So it's cool. And I appreciate that you've done the work to do that. So when we think about this, are there anything that, that you recognize as things that we think we're doing good, but we're not? As far as a misconception, the fire service might wear this as a point of pride, but in reality, we're doing something detrimental for ourselves.
Oh, I can go this 10 different ways. Do I want to go the caffeine route? Maybe.
Let's do it. I want to talk caffeine at some point. So it's a great transition. Let's do that way.
Yeah. I think it's I think you guys pride yourself in loving the job, and often loving the job leads to a lot of overtime. Right. You're adjuncting at the academy, you're adjuncting for the medic class, you're picking up, and also there's a really nice paycheck that comes with it. Right. So there's a kind of double whammy there. But the downside of that, and this is coming from someone who also overschedules herself, is that when you overschedule yourself, you're tapping into your energy reserves. And you guys are already starting off with sleep deprivation and high stress. So then what do you make up for that with? Caffeine. Right. And a lot of times I can actually significantly reduce a firefighter's consumption of caffeine by having them eat more frequently and actually fuel themselves. Right. Because there's a tendency for firefighters to have a little bit of ADHD. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Me. That sums me up pretty well.
Yeah. Where, maybe this is on shift or even off, they just start futzing around the house, and next thing you know, it's 2:00 and they haven't eaten or something like that. When I get them to eat more regularly, they have more energy, they need less caffeine. So, but with caffeine in general, I'm not anti-caffeine. Caffeine is a tool for boosting cognitive and physical performance. It's just firefighters aren't doing it to boost cognitive and physical performance. They're using it as a lifeline.
Yes.
Right. So we're looking at 400 milligrams of caffeine per day, which is the FDA recommendation for healthy people, 30 to 40 ounces of coffee total. So that the civilian, think that's reasonable. The guys running 5 calls after midnight tell me that's rookie numbers. So,
Yeah. I'll tell you the truth here. I had a period of my life for probably 6 months to a year where I was drinking 8 Monsters a day. which obviously even at the time I was like, well, this is probably not ideal. But so they were 120 a piece. So, I mean, that's 1,000 milligrams or more.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, wait a second, what's the math on that?
And then, but yeah, I've got it down to, 1 or 2 a day, which I'm pretty good about, plus coffee, which I don't count. But I think that's probably flawed too. But yeah, I the hardest part about it is that, I recognize it as a problem, but it's become so integral to my existence that I don't even know how to not do it. My mom always jokes that, if she doesn't have a Diet Coke every day, she gets a headache. Yeah. And I don't know if I quite believe her because I drink a ton of Monsters. If I skip a day, I don't get a headache. I just don't feel like I'm functioning at peak performance.
Sure.
But you're saying that potentially adding food as a backfill for that is because I find myself doing the exact opposite. I'm like, I'm just going to skip lunch and have a Monster, and then I'll cut out some calories. I'll look good in the summer. Yeah. And fundamentally, it's probably just a flawed system, right?
Sure. No, I've had recruits do that where they did 2 Reign energy drinks for lunch and no food, and then wonder why they had cardiac symptoms. Yeah. So that wasn't good. So with that, I just kind of going into tapering off. I listen, I've seen as much as 2,400 milligrams of caffeine in a day from a firefighter. So that was an issue. So typically what I'm actually recommending is finding an option that cuts their caffeine in half, which is, I'm at the sad point in my career where the white Monsters are what I'm recommending because they're half the caffeine of Reign and Bang.
Yep. I used to do Bangs, and now I said I switched to white Monsters. So I didn't even know.
Health.
Peak of health. That's what everyone says about me.
Yes, exactly. So that cuts your caffeine in half without taking away the behavior of having the energy drink. So for you've already gotten to the Monsters. Then our next thing would be to consider, is there something lower than that? So Jocko, Go, Optimum Nutrition, Amino Energy, those ones are even lower in the 90s. So that would be a consideration. There's also Starbucks has these little mini double shots. Have you seen those? Yeah. The mini ones, not the big ones. But there's a mini double shot light espresso. And I personally will use those periodically because they're just portable. They're quick. They're convenient. It doesn't take a long time to drink them. And those are 70 milligrams.
Oh, okay.
So
and that's about equivalent to a cup of coffee. Is that right? 70 milligrams-ish? Yeah.
Enough to give you a kick in the pants. But we do have evidence to support when people do cut their caffeine intake based on their tolerance, they can get headaches, flu-like symptoms, and low mood for 2 to 9 days after cutting intake. So what it sounds like is your mom has a much lower tolerance for caffeine, obviously, than you do. So her cutting out her Diet Coke, she's going to actually feel that. Whereas for you, you've just suffocated those feelings, right? You just completely. So, but from a food standpoint, if we're kind of shifting in, I have gotten some of my firefighters off of pre-workout through applesauce pouches, which sounds like witchcraft. And I'm a proud promoter of such. So basically, a lot of firefighters think caffeine provides energy, but it doesn't provide energy in the form of food. So when I have them do like an applesauce pouch or maybe 2 prior to a workout, they can push harder. Their motivation is improved because anybody who has a bad workout, like a lot of bad workouts back to back to back, you don't want to work out anymore. Yeah. You're just like, this is boring. It's, I don't feel good. And it just gets frustrating. So suddenly they have better energy. They're seeing better results. They can push harder. They can push longer. And they're motivated to keep working out with 2 servings of fruit that's non-perishable, last 6 months in a go bag or more. Now, am I claiming that's going to work after 4 calls after midnight? No, you're probably going to need a little bit of caffeine. But for those workouts where you're just like, I slept, but I just, don't want to do this. Yeah. It can work very effectively.
So then this will roll into multiple phases of this question, but talk to me about time of the day, right? Is that when we think about caffeine intake or just like total, nutritional intake, how does the time of day kind of overlay into that?
Into energy levels specifically?
Or just like, is it more detrimental, I would imagine, to have caffeine later in the day versus earlier in the day versus eating your big meal in the morning versus big meal at night versus, in general, nutrition over time, what matters and what doesn't? What's myth versus reality?
Myth versus reality. Yeah. So from a caffeine standpoint, we want to leave, it depends on the person, but it's roughly a 4 to 6 hour buffer on average from your last caffeinated beverage and bedtime. So that means if you're going to bed at 9, your last caffeinated beverage for most people is somewhere between 3 and 5 p.m., which flies in the face of I can have a cup of coffee after dinner and I sleep fine. It doesn't prevent you from falling asleep. It messes with your sleep cycles. You spend less time in rapid eye movement, REM, or deep sleep. And then you wake up the next day feeling like garbage. What do you reach for more of? Caffeine.
Yeah. It's a vicious cycle.
Vicious cycle. So caffeine, nicotine, which the Zins are a whole problem. And it's a whole nother and then alcohol. Those are the 3 things that can really impact sleep. And we all have like a different genetic processing specifically for caffeine. Some process slower, some process faster. So some people like me, for example, I need to last caffeinated beverages after 1, I'm going to be up all night. Like I'm not going to feel good. So it just depends there. But from a fueling standpoint, intermittent fasting, that's been pretty popular. Have you had a couple people?
Yeah, I've done it.
Yeah. And listen, I think intermittent fasting or time restricted feeding has a place in the fire service. We have some good evidence that paired with a Mediterranean diet, it can be very effective at improving health outcomes in firefighters. However, if I'm assuming you went straight into the 16-8.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where you're fasting.
I did even less than that at one point, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Most firefighters are like, oh, 16-8. Okay. So I start eating at noon and I stop at 8 p.m. and fast until noon the next day. But most of the firefighters I ask is if a box drops at 11, are you going to be able to perform optimally for that call? And you say no. Then my concern is that fasting window is too big for when you are on shift, especially a 24-hour or 48-hour shift. So the other thing that I see with intermittent fasting is that after a couple months, a couple years, they're starting to pick up more energy drinks. Their energy doesn't feel as good. Their workouts don't feel as good. We add breakfast back in and things pick back up. So basically what I'm saying is a lot of times with nutrition, everybody wants that hard answer. What's going to work for every single firefighter? But the reality is it depends. And it also depends on the season of life you're in. What works for you when you're a 21-year-old bachelor coming out of the academy is not going to be the same 10 years in with 2 toddlers and, a spouse versus a retiree. So we just have to kind of make those alterations throughout. Does
that hold true for actual dietary recommendations too? As far as like one person might react better to a keto diet versus a vegan diet versus Mediterranean versus go down the list of pick the diet. It's like my personal biology will react better to individual that you have to kind of find, or how does that work? Absolutely.
Actually, I lean, and maybe there's smarter people than me who would say this is dumb, but honestly, biology is great. I think that's important. It's an important factor, but actually the number one thing is, do you want to do the diet? Because if you're not going to do the diet, in Anchorman, the perfume, the Sex Panther cologne, it's like, it works 60% of the time, 100% of the time. If you're not going to follow it, it's not going to work. If you're following it a plan 60% of the time, you're not going to see the same results as if you spent it 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So with that, the union actually did, or there was a study, a survey sent out by the IAFF several years ago to about 3,500 participants. And they basically gave them a list of different types of diets without the name. So it's essentially a descriptor of the Mediterranean diet, the therapeutic lifestyle changes diet, which is a cardiac diet, paleo, keto, and Engine 2. Do you remember Engine 2?
I don't know if I know Engine 2.
Engine 2 is a vegan low-fat diet. So, yes. Guess which one was the lowest on the list of ones firefighters would consider following?
I could imagine it's probably that one based on.
Yeah. And listen, it's no rip on rip, right? Like he's trying to make the fire service better, but at the same time, like you kind of have to read the room. If firefighters don't want to follow a vegan diet, then pushing that is probably not the best bet. So basically the Engine 2 was on the lowest the lowest of the totem pole. And the Mediterranean diet was the one more like that firefighters were more likely to want to follow. So that's kind of the style of diet that I like pushing more towards firefighters, because not only do we have good evidence that firefighters like the diet and can follow the diet, but it also has good outcomes from a mental health perspective, cardiovascular disease perspective, and cancer perspective, which all of those important.
Yeah. So I personally don't know much about it. And so I would imagine others don't either. Can you give me a 10,000 foot view of what the Mediterranean diet looks like?
Yeah. So the Mediterranean diet is the diet of the Mediterranean. Yes, perfect. Exactly. Greece, Italy, that kind of area. Basically, it's a lot more fish and poultry, and then a ton of fruits and veggies and whole grains. And then the primary fat is olive oil or olives. So basically, compared to the regular firefighter, standard firefighter diet, which falls in place with the standard American diet, it's going from a lot of like packaged treats, good, like, I don't know, cakes, candies, chips, like I went into a roll call for police side, and a guy was eating Pringles and Slim Jims to prep for the nutrition presentation that day.
Oh, no. That's
what we're kind of looking at. And then very high emphasis on red meat as well for that standard kind of firefighter-y diet. Basically, you're adding a ton more fruits and veggies. And then when you do choose grains, you're trying to go for that whole grain option. And then you're also trying to get more fish in. So that's the shifts we're looking for: more fish, more fruits and veggies. So how do we do that, from a non-perishable standpoint? That's It bars. Have you ever seen those?
I don't know if I have.
So they're just dried fruit mashed in a bar. You can get them from Costco. Great for toddlers. If you got babies, they work well for them as well.
Okay. Keep it in mind.
Applesauce pouches, dried chickpeas, dried edamame. All of these things can work in a go bag. And you can still get the Mediterranean diet at Chipotle or Cava, because you can load up on beans, whole grain, rice, extra fajita veggies, extra salsas. So it's easier to do it than you would think.
So as you kind of list some of the things, I have the back end, I'm thinking about, the vitamins and nutrients that are in those things. Say you're not able to do it via Whole Foods. Are there supplements that you would recommend that people can take to kind of bridge the gap?
So before Whole Foods, we're going to talk about non-perishable things that we can take in a go bag, or frozen or canned. Frozen and canned are fine. So I do have a bone to pick with people who are like, just eat Whole Foods to firefighters, because they're not eating off of plates. So first, we want to kind of consider, do I have a go bag packed with a bunch of snack options, so that if I do get stuck on a 3-hour gas leak, I've got something so I don't eat everything that's not tied down when I get back to the station. But if we're not considering the frozen or the non-perishable options, from a supplemental standpoint, it's strictly like, we've got to individualize it. Right. So the ones that we see that I think most firefighters tend to supplement more is magnesium, potentially. Though you can get it from nuts and seeds, trail mixes, that kind of stuff. Sometimes we can see, for those who are magnesium deficient, that can improve sleep quality. And then another one, vitamin D. So vitamin D, I would say this time of year in the winter, most firefighters in the country are going to pop low vitamin D. So if we get them to supplement, their energy levels improve and their immunity improves.
Awesome.
So those are the two ones that we start with.
So I want to ask this question, because me and my wife always have this discussion. Where does dehydration play in this whole thing? Sometimes I'll be like, I'm so hungry. She'll be like, I think you're just dehydrated. Have a glass of water and see how you feel. Where does that land? Obviously, I would imagine, based off of the amount that I sweat on a given day at work, I'm probably chronically dehydrated, even if I'm unaware of it.
Sure.
How does that factor into like our nutrition?
Yeah, so it definitely can make you hungrier. But also, like I said, firefighters tend to ADHD around the station, so they actually may not have eaten enough. And often, if you are doing a 24-hour shift, you're probably burning way more calories than someone like me working a 24-hour shift, who's going to be sitting on their butt just telling firefighters to eat vegetables all day. Right. And so what that means is, a lot of times when I am prescribing like calories or macros to a firefighter who's open to trying that, we actually will increase their calories based on maybe like a smartwatch or something like that, by like 300 to 500 calories when they're on shift, regardless of weight loss goals, regardless of weight gain, maintenance. It doesn't matter what their goal is, because if you're telling me I'm doing 10, 15,000, 20,000 steps on shift without trying, that tells me that you are significantly more active than that 9-to-5er. You're essentially doing a workout that the 9-to-5er would have done without doing the workout, right? Your calorie needs are higher because you're doing more ambient movement. And so basically what that means, tying it back to that, is, a firefighter may actually truly be hungrier because a little bowl of overnight oats, that lineup, and then like an apple is like 400 calories. That's not going to do it for my 6'2", my taller firefighters, or my firefighters in general, who already cleaned the engine, already did training, and may have a couple calls in between that, plus a workout. You've barely scratched the surface in terms of your needs. So it may actually be the food piece if you're not eating enough. But the hydration factor is something there as well. Anything on that before I go into the hydration?
No, that's great. I'm interested in the hydration piece. What you have, yeah.
Yeah. So hydration. So again, we are actually looking for first responders. I go based off the Institute of Medicine standards. You can go based off of weight, though I always forget it. So 90 ounces for women, 125 for men. So that is roughly, remember the Stanley Cups everybody was losing their mind over for Christmas, the 40-ounce ones? Yep. You're looking at like 3 or 4 of those a day. Now, the good news is that coffee counts. So coffee, tea, even soda are equally hydrating to water. Though the caffeine content, caffeine is a mild diuretic. You may pee more in that first hour, but you usually replace that loss with the liquid from the coffee, the tea, the soda. So it's over the course of the day, the total body hydration stays the same. Now, that does not mean you can just drink pots of coffee all day and it counts towards your hydration goals, because I know where this is going. So with that, like I said, those caffeine goals, we're trying to keep it under 400. Some days it might go a little higher. So we just have to consider that, because it can compound the effects of dehydration if you do get really dehydrated.
So as you were talking about that, I was thinking about what you had previously said about, being hungry, feeling hungrier than, and that this is a thing that I often say to my wife, and I think she thinks I'm an idiot, but I make this case that I genuinely feel like I'm hungrier than most people. Like I think that like when I go on a diet, it's harder than other people because I'm the most hungry boy in all the world.
Yeah, and, the hungriest boy in the land.
That's how I feel. And, and so I guess, how do I navigate the waters of like my own body's signals telling me that I'm hungry when maybe I shouldn't have eaten like a certain amount, or I'm already over my calories for the day if I'm tracking or something like that? Like if I genuinely feel hungry, am I not supposed to react to that, or am I supposed to have some sort of reaction that I always give that?
Sure. Well, so this is a tricky conversation because each person's appetite is going to vary drastically. I will say, and listen, I'm not a doctor, like untreated ADHD, eating can be a stimulation, right? It gives you something to do. And food noise tends to be louder for those with ADHD. Are you familiar with the concept of food noise?
No, but I am familiar with the concept of ADHD. I'm very that.
Yeah. So food noise is essentially someone who they think about food constantly throughout the day. If it's placed in front of them, they'll probably pick it up. They might take a lap or two to the fridge or the pantry and pick some little snackies out. Like that's kind of food noise, which kind of goes with ADHD for some people. You can have that though without ADHD. So, but food noise, it can be genetic. It can just be habit, but it does make it a lot harder to lose weight or harder to stick to a calorie plan. So typically I do recommend people actually eat when they are hungry, but I will say again, the exposure to trauma, that kind of changes the brain. Sleep deprivation is going to make you hungrier than someone who's actually sleeping. So there are several things that are setting firefighters up to be hungrier. But I will also say on the other side is they have a tendency that when they want to lose weight, they cut their calories too much, too soon.
Yeah,
You're like,
I am the typical of that. I am a yo-yo dieting queen, if you will.
Yes. Slay.
I'm on the high side of my yo-yo diet right now. I'm about 200 pounds, but I've went all the way from this down to like 6-pack abs a couple times in my life, and it's not sustainable. First off, if anyone wants 6-pack abs, it sucks. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
But how do I find a homeostasis in between completely letting myself go as I sit right now and, outrageously strict diet and exercise like I've been on the other side of the spectrum?
Yeah, it helps to be supervised. And supervised means having a dietitian who slaps you around to make sure that you don't do stupid stuff. But in absence of a dietitian, so typically a firefighter will go to like MyFitnessPal or like Lose It. Did you do an app or something like that?
Yeah, MyFitnessPal. For sure. I'll tell you my methodology and you can pick that apart while you answer this too.
Oh, perfect.
So every time I've shredded weight down or done a big cut, I've always done it the exact same way. I've picked a total protein macro and I've picked a total calorie macro. And that's the only thing I track at all. As long as I hit my protein for the day, as long as I hit my total calories for the day, whatever fills out the balance is what it is. And that's how I've been successful cutting weight every time. I don't know if that's a good method, but it seems to work. I don't
hate it. Yeah, that's actually like 50% of my method. So look at you. Yeah, you're checking the boxes. Yeah. So really the biggest thing within MyFitnessPal. So when you go into MyFitnessPal or any calorie app and you're like, my goal is, it usually will say maintain, lose 0.5 pounds a week, 1 pound a week, or 2 pounds a week. And guess which one the firefighters circle every single time?
Yeah, two or 2.5. I always just max it out.
The highest one, like you max it because by the time you're actually asking for help from this app, you are like, I am so plump and juicy that I feel like my uniform pants are going to split. We need this yesterday. So the downside of that is when you pick 2 pounds a week, you are drastically cutting your calories by like over 1,000 calories per day. So then next thing you know, you're on an 1,800 calorie diet as a bigger dude. Like 1,800 calories for me as a smaller female is like, that's not going to go well for me actually. So it cuts their calories too low. So they feel like they have to suffer to lose weight. And while losing weight, there's going to be a level of suffering. It's not nearly the amount that most firefighters are used to trying to just suck it up and deal with it. Right.
Yeah.
So so actually we go with 0.5 to 1 pound a week. And that's where we stay. Now that is going to lead to longer weight loss, longer time to get to the weight loss you want. And that flies in the face of people who come to me 2 weeks before the cruise that they're going on. But here's the thing. You can have a cupcake at your kid's birthday party. You can have a beer at your captain's retirement. Did I say captain's birthday party? I meant kids. But you can have more flexibility in your life, which makes it easier to stick to. But then the other side of the calories conversation, like I said, is if you are at a medium to busy station, you are likely going to have to add 300 to 500 calories, regardless of what that app says, on the day you're working so that you don't end up binging and saying, screw it, at some point during that shift.
What is your perspective on macro and calories, specifically more total calories? The last time I did my cut, I transitioned from doing daily tracking to weekly tracking to like have a total, 3,500 calories being a pound, and then going to, I want to lose 3 pounds a week or 2 pounds a week, whatever the number was, tracking it over the course of a week instead of daily. Do you think that's a good methodology or?
Yeah, you can certainly do it. But like I said, it gets kind of tricky with firefighters because depending on how their shifts are and what the schedule is, it can like I said, so you might say, I work out 3 to 5 times a week, 3 to 4 times a week. I lift and that's my workout. I run and that's my workout. But we're adding an extra workout or two because you're on shift. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like you might get those numbers. This is where having a professional like that understands the fire service is important, is I can look at those numbers and hear you tell me you are hungrier when you're on shift. We need to add a little bit more here. So you can use some of that intuition, but the other side of it is it just, you're getting back from that 2 a.m. toe pain call and you're like, God, that sucked. And I'm probably going to wake up again. So let me just have a little snack.
Yeah. I call those my sad snacks.
Yes.
I keep them I keep them in the back of the engine and I eat them when I'm feeling sad overnight.
Yes. Yeah. So like, are you doing that because you're hungry? So, and most people are going to say probably not. Oh.
Yeah. I think that's probably, it just lifts the mood a little bit when you're doing something you don't want to do.
Improves the vibe.
Sometimes you got to this is so stupid, but when I was doing my like hardcore dieting, I would purposefully save up calories in the day for my sad snacks overnight. So I'd be like, I got an extra 500 calories in the bank. So I can have, a Snickers bar at 2 a.m. or whatever.
And that's actually a good strategy. So I used to do bodybuilding. Don't look at like it anymore. But I knew I was going to have my sad snack at like 8 p.m. I was going to hit feelings at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
And so I would put ice cream in. My ice cream would be logged in at the beginning of the day so I could eat around it.
So, there you go.
Yeah. So basically I'd have less carbs and fat to work with for most of the day. And I'd have to be a little bit more protein veggie heavy, but I still had room for my treat at night. And that is an effective strategy. It works. Now, does that mean I can have a gallon of ice cream or like a foot long Snickers bar? No, but it gives you something.
Yeah, for sure. So as we kind of start to look to wrap here, what is the future of the business? What are you trying to do with RescueRD? I know you have a good online presence, and then obviously you're reaching out to departments and people personally to try to offer them nutrition advice. What's the future? What's going on right now?
Yeah, so I have a lot of really exciting stuff over the next few years, but I'm pushing the workshops that I deliver now. So workshops are 4 to 6 hours, and they are intended to create force multipliers in your department. So your peer fitness trainers, your company officers, your chiefs, or just firefighters who are interested in nutrition, showing them how they can kind of change the hydration, caffeine use, and general nutrition of your department. So this can also help with preventing injuries, specifically hydration-related injuries during the summer. So I am running a special until February 28th of 2025, where you get Quick Bites for free. And what Quick Bites is 12 10-minute videos that you can put into Target or Vector Solutions to prolong those workshops and have firefighters reminded about nutrition, hot topics throughout the year. So you might be like, they don't want any more Target Solutions. I have gotten some good feedback that this is the one Target Solution training that firefighters seem to like. So I take that as a badge of honor. But yeah, so you can reach out to me and we can customize a workshop for your department. But other than that, I do have a podcast coming out called Fueling Fire. And then fire engineering, I'm working on a recipe book called Fueling Fire as well. That should come out in 2026, 2027.
Awesome. Great. So give me one more time where they can find you, what your social handles are, what the website is, so they can find you if they need you.
Yep. RescueRD.com. You can go there for a free station dinner recipe book. And then at rescue.rd on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the insight. I'm going to try to put it into action in my life, hopefully cut down on the energy drinks, increase the fruits and vegetables, and see what it can do for me. I appreciate it.
That's all I asked for. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.